and welcome to our webinar, Fueling Company Growth Through a Successful People Strategy. I'm Carolyn Lowell with Bone Zone, and speaking today are three leaders with deep understanding on how crafting an influential people strategy and building the right culture really enables and accelerates company growth. Our conversation will be moderated by Jody Gilmore, who is President and Business Unit Director of Orthopedics at Elos MedTech. And joining her are two panelists. Monica Tapper is HR Director at Elos MedTech, and Meg Crosby is co-founder and people strategist at PeopleCap Advisors. Before we jump into our conversation, I'd like to thank Elos MedTech for sponsoring this important topic on people strategy. Elos MedTech is a leading development and production partner for orthopedic implants, instruments, and components. The company has a global presence, and its complete performance offering provides OEM solutions from concept design to development to dock-to-stock inventory. Elos is committed to fostering and growing a talented and high-performing workforce, which you're going to hear more about during this webinar. Now I would like to invite Meg, Monica, and Jody to turn on their cameras and join the conversation. As I mentioned, our moderator is Jody Gilmore. She leads Elos MedTech's global orthopedics business, where she is responsible for driving its growth strategy and developing its commercial portfolio. Jody has more than 25 years of medical device experience, and during her tenure, she has driven change, delivered successful outcomes, and established strong relationships with leading orthopedic companies. With that overview, Jody, I will hand it over to you to introduce Meg and Monica and start the discussion.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I really appreciate this today. The topic of fueling company growth through a successful people strategy is one that personally I feel very passionately about, and I know it's a bit of an unconventional webinar, but it's something that I think is a really important topic for us to speak on, and so I'm super excited to do that today. When seeking to fuel growth and serve customers and really genuinely create a sustained competitive advantage, it is, of course, important to focus on the technology of a company, your products, your processes, the facilities and equipment, and how you leverage that. But it's equally accurate, I think, to say that any organization's most powerful asset is genuinely its people, and that must be developed and nurtured and empowered in the best possible way. And to me, this is really a key differentiator, a real X factor for any organization as they seek to grow and build a competitive offering in the long run. And this is precisely why Elos MedTech made this very strategic decision to invest in HR and to develop its global people strategy, and also why I chose to host this webinar to bring together two amazing experts in this field. And so I'd like to introduce those now. First, we have Monica Tapper, who is our global head of HR at Elos MedTech. And Monica is responsible for developing and delivering our people strategy worldwide. She's uniquely qualified to do this, given her 25 years of senior leadership experience within HR, and it's also combined with a background in employment law. And we are really thrilled to have her on board at Elos MedTech. Fun little fact about Monica. Monica is a killer backgammon player. Although I have not played her yet. So look forward to that in the future. And so welcome today, Monica.
Thank you.
Also on our panel is Meg Crosby. Meg Crosby is co-founder of PeopleCap, which is a consulting firm that brings people expertise to high growth companies and investors, and also teaches organizations how to unleash the full potential through their people. Meg has vast experience advising CEOs, boards, and investors on developing growth-focused people strategies. And a fun fact about Meg, she's actually pretty good at hopping fences, which I happen to know firsthand. We can talk about that later. But thank you, Monica and Meg, and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you.
To start off our webinar, I would really like to turn to Meg and have her talk a bit about the 6 elements of a successful people strategy that she and her company at PeopleCap refer to as the 6 imperatives. It's really fascinating to me, and I'm really excited to hear Meg kind of unpack that a little bit and talk about those 6 imperatives. Meg?
Sure, I'm happy to. Jody, thanks so much for having me. It's just a pleasure to be here with you and Monica both to talk about this topic, which is near and dear to my heart and has been the focus of most of my career. So grateful to to you for the opportunity. As we have worked at PeopleCap with companies over the years, we started to notice that the issues and opportunities that companies and our clients had really fell into one of six buckets. And so we began to sort of codify those buckets and think about those in terms of the elements of a successful people strategy. And I think the best way to explain it really is to think about an analogy that I like to use is personal health or personal, I guess, personal health and well-being, our personal or physical performance. And when we think about getting in shape, if I were to say to you, Jody, for New Year's, your New Year's resolution is you're going to get healthy, you would have multiple areas of practice that you would be thinking about. You would be thinking about things like going to the gym and maybe doing some cardio and some weights, but you might also be thinking about getting better sleep or eating a healthy diet or drinking more water. So there are lots of different elements that contribute to our personal, physical performance. And in the same way, there are multiple different practice areas that combine to make for a healthy organization. And so that's really where the six imperatives, I think, come in handy. And I think it's also important to note that in the same way we think about personal health, you're never quite finished, right? You don't ever arrive at this point where you say, okay, I've made it, I'm healthy, I can stop now. It's a constant battle, and it's also an exercise in continuous improvement in the business world, I think is the best way to think about it. So our six imperatives are framed as imperatives because that's the way we frame them, so that we know that we're never finished, that that's something that leaders can continuously work on in order to improve their organizational health. And so the six imperatives are, we'll start with the first one, which is sharpen focus. And sharpen focus is really about vision and strategy of the organization and the goal setting and being focused on what it is that the business needs to achieve. And that's the first one. We have several practices, the best practices within that. The second one is calibrate culture. And calibrate culture is about the organizational culture and the behaviors that the organization wants to incentivize that are important to achieving its strategy. The third one is strengthen leadership. And strengthen leadership, it's about the composition and also the cohesion of the leadership team. And so lots of great practices and methods to achieving that. The fourth of the imperatives is elevate talent. As you'll see on my background, my Zoom background here, our tagline is people drive results. And we believe that all organizations are made up of people. And so those are the keys to unleashing your potential and driving your results. So how do you elevate your talent for outsized results? The fifth imperative is align structure. Many people make the mistake of thinking that your organizational structure is a fixed thing, but it is not. And it is dynamic and should shift according to your strategy as your strategy shifts. So structures also include things like our processes and policies that we want to align with our strategy. And the sixth imperative is amplify communication. And this is all about the information in the organization. What information rather are we giving to the organization, and how is that information flowing through the organization? And then what information are we able to harvest from the organization? What do we learn from the organization as well? So those are the six imperatives, and that is the way that we think about people strategy. And when we develop a people strategy, we have goals in each one of those six imperatives. And we know that those elements all work together to create successful organizational health.
Great. Thanks, Meg. One question I have for you on that is it really has to do with kind of the elevating your talent. And as an organization grows, how do you really make sure that you don't outscale your leadership? Clearly, not only are there going to be more people in an organization, but there might be more demanded of them. And everyone not only, might have new talent, but what would you say is some of the best practices on how to identify and fill gaps, how to kind of elevate the existing talent you have as well as fill it with others, and how to kind of deepen the overall leadership bench? What would you say are some of the best practices that companies can follow to make sure that they're doing that?
Well, one of my favorite quotes, and I always say it's going to be, my epitaph, is structure follows strategy. And so the first thing when I go into an organization that I look at is the structure of the leadership team. And I look at that composition to make sure that the leadership team is aligned with the strategy. And if the strategy changes, or if the stage of growth of an organization changes, so for example, if the organization is going to be really focused on growth and has, some significant revenue goals, do they have the sales leadership, or is the revenue center led by someone who can make those, achieve those goals? And sometimes it becomes important to level up in those positions. So the first thing I do is look at the leadership team and think about that relative to the strategy. And next, you think about the developing that next layer of leadership. And as companies grow, they begin with a one leadership team. Actually, they begin with one team, and then they grow outward from there into functional teams. And then eventually those functions grow to a size where they require additional talent as well. And I think what happens invariably is that we promote really strong individual contributors into leadership positions. And we generally, what we see is that organizations sort of fail to both account for the capacity that it takes for leaders to take on people management. And they also don't necessarily take the time to train leaders in people management, what it means to manage at the company. And so Google has done a number of studies on management, that middle management layer. And really, for companies, the biggest bang for your buck is to invest in that layer of people, because they've proved the old adage that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. And so strengthening that level of leadership, that next level of leader, is so critical to building a strong organization. So my advice is always to be very thoughtful about how much time it takes for these leaders as they move from individual contributors into those leadership roles, how much time it takes for them to manage, to set that clear expectation, and then set out the clear practices, having one-on-ones, giving feedback, coaching, really important for those folks to learn what are the skills that are different from their vocational skills from their day-to-day operational work that they do, but these people management skills that they need to learn to be effective.
Oh, no, that's great. Absolutely. And I think it's essential as any growing company that they really recognize all the levels of leadership, and that their leadership has the time and the right skill sets and the mentorship to be able to kind of elevate their own personal leadership practice. So super appreciate that. It does bring me to my next question, which is, things move really fast in a growing company. And as you said, trying to have time, but also if you have a company, like I think Elos Medtech is one where we have a lot of it's a very entrepreneurial mindset. And things move very fast, and it's kind of easy sometimes to get absorbed in the whirlwind. But one of your other really important aspects is about amplifying the communication. So what kind of advice would you have about the types of things that leadership can do? And what are some of the things that everyone needs to have on their radar to make sure that communication is sound and that everyone at all levels is really on the same page? Because I think in any swift moving and fast growing organization, things do change. And that communication aspect of it is really, really important, and then becomes part of that whole leadership process. So what advice would you say, or what things do we always need to make sure we have on our radar as it relates to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a big picture perspective and from a leadership perspective, the first thing I would say is to really make sure that all of your communication is infused with your culture. And you can use culture and your values as a litmus test for the messages that you're sending out to make sure that those messages are aligned and that you're speaking in a language that's congruent with your culture and fluent, that your leaders are fluent in your culture, and that you're reinforcing those cultural pillars, at all times. I think that's really important. Another thing that is really important for organizations is to listen. A lot of times we think about communication and we think about what we say and top down messaging, but we forget about the two-way communication and putting processes in place so that we can listen to employees, that we understand what's happening on the front line. We can understand what's happening with our customers through the voices of people who are actually directly interfacing with them. So really important to set up methods of communication that listen to the organization, whether that's an employee engagement survey or it's management by walking around or it's setting up periodic check-ins and making sure that we're talking to those middle managers about what they're hearing from the front lines. I think those are a really important thing. So listening is incredibly important. One just small best practice that I think anybody can use in the organization is thinking about cascading communication. And as you wrap up some sort of leadership meeting or a staff meeting, to take the last 5 minutes to recap what it is you decided and agree on the talking points. What needs to be communicated from this meeting? What should stay in this meeting? What should stay between the group, stay confidential, but importantly, what do we need to communicate out from this meeting and to whom and by when? And everybody could agree on that. I just was in a meeting the other day. It was great. We put it up on the whiteboard and then everybody, snapped a photo of it on their phone and went back to their desks and was able to craft an email in their own words, but with the key bullet points that came out of the meeting. I think that's really important.
Excellent. Thank you, Meg. And that actually leads me into a question that I want to have for Monica, because you talked a little bit about your values and your culture and making sure that your communication is aligned. And at Elos MedTech, our core values are passionate, trustworthy, and results oriented.
Yes.
These are really not simply words. That they are absolutely the embodiment of who we are. It's really kind of built into the very fabric of our DNA. So my question for you, Monica, is how do you see your role and HR's global role in really promoting and developing these shared values across our global organization?
That's a very good question. And I think HR play a really important role here, but not alone. We need to work together with the manager because we cannot bear the values. It's not HR's task to do that, but we do that together with the managers. But what I think HR can do is to make sure, and I think you touched upon it, Meg, I think that we can or our job is really to make sure that our policies, the way we communicate, everything we do is well grounded in our values and in the culture. Another thing I think we should do is, or I know we will do in Elos MedTech, and that is really to train the manager. So one of the values is trustworthy. What does that mean in behavior? As a manager, how do I act to be trustworthy? And that's something that we will train our manager in. So that's how HR can support.
That's great. No, absolutely. And I was going to kind of getting back to that a little bit, a question about culture, because I think it is really important. That is really the common thread. And it's also a key differentiator from one company to the next. That culture really shines through. And it can help not only with everybody knowing very clearly who we are as a company, but also as we seek to grow with new employees or other business stakeholders and other partners. So, Meg, I would say to you, how does a company, especially one that is growing rapidly, and you can see the key theme here, is properly develop and evolve its culture without losing sight? Because I know it has to be evolved, but you don't ever want to lose sight of your roots and your core values, because those are the foundation. But how do you continue to evolve those without leaving behind, without just basically becoming a company that you look back and you say you don't even recognize yourselves?
I think that's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
We have a methodology when we talk about culture that there are 3 steps to creating a world-class culture, and it's really simple. First, you define the culture. Then you have to demonstrate it, and that means reinforce it through all the processes in your organization and your communication, and your just the way you behave. And leadership sets that example. And then the most difficult step, but arguably the most important, is to defend your culture. And really, what that means is to use your culture in decision making, so that when you're making big decisions, big strategic decisions, or even small decisions, maybe it's hiring people on the front lines, you need to have that cultural lens to make sure that that decision that you make is aligned with and congruent with your culture. I think that's really important. We see companies, there's so many headlines that we could talk about. Bank of America is certainly one, Enron, all these companies that really have met their demise because they did not stay true to their culture. I see it constantly. When I think about big decisions, I think about, looking at a merger or acquisition through the culture lens, is this company going to be aligned with our behaviors? Do they have the same values that we have, or can we map those values? We might not use the same words, but can we map them together? The same is true if you're taking on an investor. I see in the boardroom a lot of folks will go out for investment, and they'll to raise money, and they won't think about the need to have a cultural fit with someone that they're adding to their board. And that can be really disruptive if you have someone on your board who is not aligned with your values. So these are big decisions that I think culture plays a huge role in helping us weigh those decisions. You talked about how do you evolve your culture. It's funny, we use the word calibrate culture because calibration sort of gives that sense of small movements. So we know that our culture can adjust to changes in the business, but you can't really make a wholesale change. You can't just throw out your culture and start over. That's a really difficult thing to do. So we think small changes, the values that you have lend themselves to being defined potentially in different ways as the company grows, to adding definitions and to thinking about new behaviors that resonate within the pillars that you've already established.
Oh, that's fantastic. Great stuff. So moving back to you, Monica, tell us a little bit about why you believe that it's really important to have a people strategy, and where do you hope to see Elos MedTech in the next few years as we continue to develop our people strategy?
I think it's to have a good and solid people strategy, it's even more than important. It's to me, it's critical because it's such a big and important part of whether the company will be a success or a failure. And if we don't want to be a failure, because we know that the people is behind whether the company is a success or a failure, and if we don't want to be a failure, we need to invest in our people. And in my opinion, the people strategy should act as a guide in how we bring the best out in our people. And we need to have the right policies in place. We need to have the right leadership competencies in place, the tools in place to make that happen. And we will succeed there. And when we have this in place, it will definitely help. It will be a huge part of whether the company will be successful or not, because it is about the people.
No, absolutely. I agree. And also, as someone who is new to Elos MedTech, because I've, of course, been in this company for many, many years. And so what was something that really kind of struck you most about the company? Or you've had a vast experience with a lot of different companies, large and small. So I would really be interested to know some of your reflections about what struck you most about Elos MedTech.
And I must say the people, because they are 100% fantastic people. Really, really inclusive, friendly, kind, extremely knowledgeable, and they do know the business. So absolutely the people. And also the fun, future we have ahead of us.
Absolutely.
But absolutely the people.
it's really nice to be associated with a company, not only that's doing something so meaningful, but also that is growing as significantly as we are in US MedTech, but also to be doing it with, like you say, a group of people that are genuinely very fun, passionate. I mean, truly demonstrate, the values, passionate, trustworthy, results oriented.
Yeah.
But also very much wanting to get the job done. It's not a political or egotistical type of environment. It's really a good collaborative environment. And as you say, and as Meg said, when you're looking at adding to the team or adding to the board, or realistically even in your M&A activities, it's really important to kind of consider that culture and the type of people and the style that you have as a company, and make sure to see things through that lens. It was fun for me because very recently we were interviewing someone at a very senior level within the company. And I literally wrote in my notes, in this interview, that person demonstrated every single one of our core values. And so for me, that was a big check mark because they actually demonstrated those values during that interview process, which was fantastic.
Yeah, important and great.
No, absolutely. Meg, maybe before we leave off or maybe go to questions, are there any of the 6 imperatives that you think that we haven't really touched on, or that you might want to kind of maybe say a few more things about?
Sure.
I think we talked a little bit on calibrating culture, elevating talent, and strengthening leadership. Those were kind of together. Maybe you could talk a little bit about kind of the aligning of the structure. I think it's really, I like what you said earlier about the fact that your structure needs to provide a purpose, right? Your structure needs to follow the rationale for how you want to be running your company. And it's accurate to say that probably evolves over time and should evolve over time. So, maybe you could talk kind of a little bit more about that, because I think sometimes people are maybe afraid to make changes just because of the fact that they could think that it might not seem like they're really on point. But at the same time, what they really want to do is make sure that they have the right structure and they are aligning that structure and have the right leadership to do what they need to. So.
Sure, absolutely. Again, my favorite quote, I come back to it all the time because it really is super helpful, is structure follows strategy. So when everyone gets together kind of at the end of the year to start to look at the strategy for the next year, it's important to take that to the next level and say, okay, this is the strategy we've decided upon. How is our organization going to get there? Do we have the right people in the right seats to make that happen? Do we need to make some changes so that our organization is more nimble, it moves faster? Do we have the right experience? As companies grow, they need to level up. We have developed what we call the growth gauntlet, which sort of takes the 6 imperatives and tracks them across the stages of growth. And it strikes me, the great quote, what got you here won't get you there. And you level up and you sort of think things are going well, and then you add on this massive complexity by hiring, growing by 20%. So adding 20% more people, or 50%, or doubling in size. And you have to have different practices, different structures. Someone who can lead a function that, has 20 people in it may not be the same leader who can lead that function when there are 1,000 people in it. It's just a very different job. And so it's important to look at the strategy, think about what the strategy needs, and whether or not the people that are there have the skills and abilities to do that. And then also, I'll tell an interesting story. We had a client that we did some work with their leadership team. And one of the questions we asked, do you think it's a simple enough question? We said, what kind of company are you? And there were 5 people on the leadership team, and we got 5 different answers. So it's really interesting. And the investors believed that this was a technology company, and yet the CTO was not on the leadership team. And so we said, if you are a tech company and that is your future, then it's important that your CTO be on the leadership team. That's the rationale for your business. And so, that it sounds obvious, but it wasn't obvious to them. So making that change was important. As we dug into that, what we realized was it wasn't, they agreed with having the position on the leadership team, but the person who occupied that position wasn't in a place where they were ready to be that executive. And so that conversation brought to light, we need to make a change in the structure. We need to bring someone in who is an executive in technology to carry out this strategy on this leadership team.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. Well, no, I think I really appreciate how we've kind of talked about a variety of the things as it relates to fueling growth strategies and with the people and your talent and the 6 imperatives. I think there's a lot that we can all do individually and collectively to make sure that we genuinely empower our people and make sure that we really have the strongest strategies possible to really elevate and amplify our businesses overall going forward. I will say that I really appreciate both Meg and Monica for being here today and talking about this topic, which I know is very near and dear to all of our hearts and something that we are all quite passionate about. So I think that we can say that this webinar is concluded. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. As I had mentioned to Meg and Jody and Monica, that our mission too is to improve people's individual performances and company performances. And while it's so important, of course, to talk about the trends and what's driving the orthopedic industry, you can't do that right without people and having really important cultures and driving individual performance. So thank you all for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And also, thank you to those for listening. You can learn more about our sponsor, Elos MedTech, at elosmedtech.com, and you can access more on-demand webinars at bonezonepub.com.